Well, good afternoon. Today we're in Psalm chapter 61, and I just want to read to you the first two verses. David begins by saying, "Hear my cry, O God, attend to my prayer. From the ends of the earth I will cry rather unto thee. When my heart is overwhelmed, lead me to the rock that is higher than I." Uh, let's think about it just for a moment, where David says he is overwhelmed. Have you ever felt that you're overwhelmed? As I was reflecting upon this, I think sometimes there's a list. We face so many different problems in life that we just feel, uh, 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 overwhelmed with it. We just can't handle it anymore. We're stretched too far. We're burnt out. We're depressed. We don't know what to do. And I think there's a list here. Sometimes, we're just buried with shame or guilt, or we're overwhelmed with fear or loneliness. Life can be just so overwhelming if it's not something emotionally that we're struggling with, and we just feel that we can't do it anymore. We can't handle it anymore. It's other things, like even things like work. We just feel overwhelmed with work. We're stretched too far. We just can't deal with it anymore. It enters into our families. We may be having problems that are so overwhelming in our relationship with our husband or our wife, or if it's not that, it's the kids. They get into things and do things, and it just seems that it's too hard to handle. It's just so overwhelming, and so I think that most of us either have experienced that. If you haven't lived long enough, you will, where just things just seem to be overwhelming. We're burnt out, and we're at the end of our rope. And so what David does is several things here, because we don't really know what the background is. He may have been referring to when he was a fugitive, running from Saul. He's just exhausted. This thing went on and on and on almost forever. And so what David does, he says, I think three things. The first thing, of course, is he talks about prayer. And we've been talking about how valuable prayer is, and crying out to God, and because you are experiences. And by the way, we can't do a lesson here, but it's interesting. I think that you can even see some of the godly men in the Bible who were just overwhelmed with different things, whether it was sorrow or exhaustion or just can't handle things anymore. I think of Elijah, and even the Lord in the Garden of Gethsemane was overwhelmed with things, and to the point where, the Bible says he sweat with blood. And so I'm just saying that there are those times when we just feel buried with things, and we want to give up. It seems so hopeless. It seems that we're so powerless to do anything. And so what David does, of course, is he goes to prayer. And then the second thing, and I want you to think about what he says, he goes to someone who is higher than himself. Now think about this for a moment. He realizes he can't handle it himself. He realizes he needs help. He knows that he has to go to someone who is higher than himself, who has more strength than himself. And I think this is important, because you see, a lot of times when we're desperate and we're overwhelmed with things, we don't go to the right person, or we don't do the right things. In fact, sometimes when people are overwhelmed, they just do really dumb things or do the wrong things. Maybe they find their friend with Jack Daniels, or they end up taking drugs, or something like that, and they don't go to the help that's higher than themselves. Don't go to the lower than yourself. Don't get with your stupid friends, or don't go down the wrong path. Go to someone who is higher than yourself, where you can find some real help. And so what David does, does, he prays to God, and he goes to someone who is higher than himself. Boy, I'd just like you to just pause on that thought today. Seeking someone who is higher than yourself, and of course that's God. And that's why David says, he's my rock. You see, sometimes when you're overwhelmed, you need a place to stand on. You need a place of safety. You need a place to get yourself back together. You need that place of rest. And so what David says, that God is my rock. He's my shelter. This is where I go to when I'm overwhelmed. Can I suggest to you today that you do that also? That when you feel overwhelmed with things, and I don't want to get into a big list there, because some things, are it's just been something else. It might be your health. It's been something you've been dealing with for a long time. It might be the loss of a loved one. It may be grief and sorrow. This is all that kind of stuff that happens in life. It's not always happy trails. You know that. I know that. So one, you cry out to God. You go to someone, and that is God, who's higher than yourself. Don't rely on yourself to get you through it. I mean, you're at the end of the rope when you're overwhelmed. And then, of course, you see, what we want to say in the Psalms is that you need to understand that there's the place you need to go to and you ought to go to. So that's a good thought for today in our Psalm chapter 61 about how to deal with things when you're really overwhelmed. And I hope that these thoughts in the book of Psalms are helpful to you. And just keep in mind that when we talk about this, it doesn't mean that just folks that just don't have it together get overwhelmed, because in this context here, it's David himself who's overwhelmed. And we go down that path sometimes, and we need to get back to God. So I hope that's helpful to you. You ponder on that and reflect upon it, going to someone who is higher than yourself. We'll see you tonight at 7.